Okay, guys. Okay, I'm gonna give you two short lectures. So I'm just gonna give you a little lecture about this section, and then later in the class, I'm gonna give you another lecture about presentation of 3D models for the other project. So we got this section, this technical section, and we have the 3D model project for Niels. Okay. So somebody in the class here sent me this this drawing. So I'm just going to use it as an example of what I'm talking about, because what I really want to get into is, you know, that you have a logical or a kind of conscious selection of line thicknesses. To me, looking at this drawing here, it seems like the most important thing in the drawing are these battens, both the battens holding up the tiles and the battens holding up the plasterboard down here, because they've been given a thicker line weight to everything else. So if I was to get this drawing, I would first of all concentrate on the battens, and you know that's obviously not the most important thing in the drawing here. So it's important that you consciously decide on line thicknesses for your drawing, so that they have some kind of graphical quality that is continuous throughout. Similarly, down here we've got something that looks like a lightweight concrete wall, but this has got a thinner line weight than these bricks over here. So for some reason the bricks, which are not structural, have been given more importance in the drawing than the structural element of the drawing. So that doesn't make any sense to me. If anything, it should be the other way around. The structural element always gets the thickest lines, and the elements that are hanging off the structure get the thinnest lines.
Yeah, the problem was we couldn't figure out how to do the bricks in a thin line.
This is exactly so. This is what I'm talking about today. So so what I want to talk about specifically today is setting up line weights and line thicknesses. So everything to do with Revit that's relevant for the entire project is under the Manage tab. So this is where you get to control all the elements in the project that are kind of global. So if I go under Manage here, there's a kind of a spanner, and under there is additional settings. If I open that up, there's four options down here: line styles, line weights, line patterns, halftone, underlay. Line patterns is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, it's all the different line patterns within the project that you can choose. So you can choose any of these and set up your own line pattern using these, or set up your own line style using these line patterns. Okay, so they either got dashes or dots, or a combination of dashes and dots, or whatever. So that's one thing. The next thing up is line weights. Now, if you open up line weights, you get something like this. Along the top here, we've got the scale of the drawing. So this is showing us that depending on the scale of the drawing, the line thicknesses are going to be different. And that makes sense, because if you want something to print out at 1 to 5 and you also want to print it out at 1 to 50, you don't want the line thickness to be the same, because at 1 to 50 all the detail will just be lost in a big mush of ink, so you won't be able to see it. So you want the line thicknesses to modify as you go across the scale. So that's one thing. And down here, the first 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are standard architect pens. When I was in architecture school, we did everything with ink pens, and I had an ink pen that was 0.18 millimeters. I had one that was 0.25 millimeters, and so on and so on. They cost a lot of money, and they were always breaking and putting ink all over the place. But you know, we got rid of them. But the kind of the graphical style that they represent is still there in the background. Okay, so pretty much everything in technical drawing should be either 0.18, 0.25, 0.35, or 0.5. And 0.5 is usually left to, you know, enormous things like entire walls or whatever. So the outline of an entire wall would be 0.5. In a technical drawing, it's best to have everything set to 0.18, unless you have a specific reason to change it to a thicker line. So everything should be thin, unless you want to change it to something thicker. So here we can see that if we choose number 1, we'll get a 0.18, and we can use within these 1, 2, 3, 4. We can pretty much use everything that we want in a technical drawing. Okay. The only time I would go thinner than that is if we had a hatch that we want to really pull back into the graphics of the drawing. And down here we have number 15 and number 16. And number 15 is an extremely thin pen, 0.09. So if you want to have a very, very thin drawing, depending on your style of drawing, you can use a 0.09 or a 0.13. But I would say most people would use these four at the top here. Okay? We can also change these in here, but there's no reason to change them. So I'm just going to press OK. So then the top one here is where we have line styles. And when you open this up, you get this little thing here. It just says lines. If you press the little plus symbol, this shows all the lines that are in use in the project at the moment. And you can see the line weight is given over here. So everything that is 1 relates to the 1 in the line thickness panel that we just saw. So this is a 0.18 pen, and this is a 0.35 pen, and fine lines is set to 15 and so on. We have the option in here just to change the line thicknesses that we want. At the moment, thin lines are set to 1, medium lines are set to 3, and wide lines are set to 5. And that's pretty standard. So a thin line is 0.18, a medium line is 0.35, and a wide line is 0.5, according to the table we just saw. So we can leave that as it is. But we have stuff like the insulation lines. Now maybe we want to take those down. Often you see people take their insulation lines, they either give it a much thinner line, so I could change it to a 15 or a 16. Let's change it to a 16. But I can also change the color of it. And I can change the color to, let's say, a gray, like that. Okay? And if I apply that, if you just watch the image behind as I press apply, it just takes the insulation a little bit back in the drawing. It makes it a little bit more graphically less important than the structural elements of the drawing. And that's kind of what you want. You don't want to give the insulation, you don't want it popping out of the drawing at full force, because you just want to show that there's insulation there. You don't need it to be stressed. The only thing that needs to be stressed are the structural elements of the drawing. Okay. So then we have a structural wall here, and this structural wall has been drawn as a filled region, I can see, by whoever drew it here. But because it's a structural element, it should actually have a much thicker line around the edge, because we want it to really give the sense that it is a structural element. To me, if I was to look at this quickly, and if I thought the person who drew it knew what they were doing, I would assume that the brick facade was the structural element in the drawing here, because it's given much more weight than the actual structural element here. So we need to give that at least as much weight as the bricks here. So I'm going to select it, and the way to change the line type of a filled region is to edit the boundary. So once we edit the boundary, I can actually select individual lines in the boundary, and I can change their thickness. At the moment it's set to thin lines. I can just change it to wide lines, or I can leave the cursor sitting on top and press the tab key, which means it selects all the connected lines, and I can go up and change them all to wide lines to start with. And if I accept that, you can see that suddenly now the structural element has been given the right amount of weight in the drawing. So it really does look as if it's holding up the roof. Okay, does that make sense so far?
So can you do this again this time? I have to.
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to pause the video and then I'll do it again. Okay. So the bricks. Yeah. So let's select the bricks. Now you can't automatically do it because they're families that are put together. So let's first select it and see what it's made of. So if I select the repeating detail here and I go to edit type, I can see that it's made from a detail called brick DK size detail item 108. Okay. So now I'm going to go and insert one of those. So I'm going to say annotate component, detail component, and I go over and find the brick DK size detail item 108. So there it is there. So it's made up of a lot of these guys put together, pretty much. Yeah. So if I want to change it, I go and select it and press edit family. And this is where we're starting to get into family editing, which I'm going to go into in detail in about 2 months. But this brings us into the family editor. And in here we have the same situation that we had before, in that this is where we can actually edit the edges. So it's made of the same stuff. So at the moment it's a filled region called masonry. I can edit the boundary, and I can use the tab button and select them all, and I can change them to all thin lines, for example, and accept it. And then if I load this back into the project and overwrite the existing version, you can see that the lines have been brought back down to thin lines again. But they've been brought in every single brick in every situation, so you only need to modify one of them. So again, the key to that is you select the repeating detail if it's a repeating detail, come over to edit type, and then you find what is the actual detail that's repeating. At the moment it's called brick DK size, detail item 108. So then we just go into annotate and component, and we insert that specific one, and then we can modify it. Alright? I'm going to hold pause there again. Okay, guys, I think I'll just do one more thing with the cross section, and then I'll give you a little bit of stuff about the 3D models. Okay? So the one thing we haven't done is we haven't created a a line type yet. So if you want to create a new line, let's say we wanted to put in a damp-proof course or some kind of membrane in this roof here, we need to create a kind of a line type for it. So again, we go into Manage, Additional Settings, and Line Styles. So I'm going to create a new line style. So here we have all the lines that we have in the project. So down the bottom here we just have the button New. So I'm going to press New, and I'm going to call this Membrane, and press OK. So now we have a membrane line in there. So all we have to do is give it all the values that we want. So we want it to be quite thick, so I'm going to make it a 0.35. I'm going to just make it red so it's obvious in the image here on the screen, and I'm going to give it a type. Here, there is a BIPS membrane line type set up here, but it tends to be very, very long. So let's try and see if we got some other options down here, just like a dashed line or something. Dash dot dash. Let's just try dash and apply. Okay. So now if I wanted to draw a membrane in, we go back to the Annotate tab, use Detail Line, and now instead of wide line we can use membrane. So it's just there ready to go. And let's just say for some reason that we were going to put it on this line here. You can see that it just draws it in for us like that. So you can basically set up very simply any number of line types just to do what you want to do, and you can play with the colors. You can play with the number of dashes and the number of dots in the under Manage, Additional Settings, Line Styles. Yeah.
2 questions.
Okay, just to very quickly get you involved in the. We've been talking about the technical side of stuff, and I'll be pushing that on you pretty quickly because we need to get it. I just want to get it down on video so you can refer to it, and then you can use it in your drawings. Will all look fantastic by the end of the next 3 weeks. But I also want to talk about the concept stuff that we have that you're doing for Niels. So I just have this little project that I wanted to show you an example of what you can achieve with just some different view settings in a situation of a concept drawing. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to go into a section view here. Now you can see this section view. This is a typical concept section because there's no information in the walls at all. There's no information about how the building is to be constructed, because this is the point at where you're trying to sell the project to the client. So all you're talking about is the client's rooms, lifestyle, aspirations for the future, all that kind of stuff. Where they're going to park their Ferrari, all that kind of thing. So this is what you're talking about. So all they care about is where they are. They only care about their environment. So this is a concept drawing. And the way to achieve this is by, oh, there we go. If I go in and say, for example, okay, I'll just show you here. I've already done it here. But the way to achieve this is over here on the right, we have two panels. One is called Visibility and Graphics, and the other one is called Graphic Display. If you don't select anything in the project itself here, you have the values regarding the view itself. Okay, so in here we can press Visibility and Graphics, and then we have control over all the elements within the project. And you can see what's happening over here. The cut patterns within this project have all been changed to this diagonal hatch pattern. So what I've done is I've selected the top one, then I hold down the Shift key and select the bottom one, so everything is selected. Now we can come over here and we can actually control what all of them look like once the pattern is selected. So I could change them all to black, press OK, apply, and then the entire project comes out in black like this. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. This is quite a strong way of presenting a concept. Your printer won't like you. I went once to a printer with an entire apartment scheme of 35 apartments, and I'd done it like this, and even the ground was all hatched in black, and they were like, yeah, that's only a certain amount of money. When I came back, they were just looking at me. It's like there was so much ink involved in this. It was like printing. It was like printing 20 sets of drawings. So that was the last time I did everything in black and large scale prints, but that's another story. But anyway, so you could do it as well by changing everything. You do the same trick again. Top one, hold down Shift key, do the bottom one, press the button here. So let's just change everything to white, just to make the printer's life easy. Press OK, apply. So everything comes out as white. So it has more or less the same effect. You can still see the details around the moldings here and so on, but it's less expensive in terms of printing costs. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing I want to talk about is this graphic display, and this is actually quite powerful for concept drawings, and it'll very quickly make your concept drawings look quite professional. So if I press Edit here, first of all we can change the style to whatever we want. We can change it from to shaded or whatever, or we can change it to realistic, just like you can do with the little buttons, the shortcuts down the bottom here. We also have the option to switch the edges on and off. If I apply that, we can just make it purely about the shading, like this. So you can see even on the sofa here, there's no lines shown, but the materials are shown. We can go in and we can show the edges, and we can also smooth the lines. And you probably can't see that so well on the screen there, but the lines are kind of shown as a more, almost like a more traced, high quality line image than it is normally when the computer prints them out. So that's good for presentation drawings as well. The next thing we can do in here is, I won't talk about transparency right now, is we can give it a silhouette. Now, just like I was talking about giving dark lines to the surrounding elements of building elements, in 3D they call it silhouettes. So we could go in here and say, let's make all the silhouettes wide lines. So that means everything that's in 3D will pop a little bit more out of the page, and everything that's in the background will be a little bit receded. So it starts to look a little bit more like a hand drawn that's being considered, rather than just the printout of a 3D model. The next thing that we have in here is shadows. Now we have these normal cast shadows that Revit does for us, but it also has something called ambient shadows. So if I switch that on and apply it, it's probably difficult for you to see on the screen here, but there's a little bit of shade that just comes off stuff that gives it a little bit more of a 3D effect. If I switch the shadows off here, can you still see that on the? Can you still see some shade around the walls there, as if it's kind of been hatched in a little bit with a pencil? So that also gives it a little bit more of a 3D effect. So turn those shadows back on again. Apply. The other thing you have in here, if you're in America or you work for an American architect, they like to pretend that everything they do is drawn by hand. And even when they present things on the computer, they try and make it look as if it's drawn by hand. I'm just showing you this just to show you it's there. So I can do something that's called enable sketchy lines, and then I can decide, well, I want my hand to wobble by 2 degrees, and I want to extend it like this, and then suddenly my drawing looks like that. If you show this to a European architect, they'll try not to throw up, because this is just fakery. But if you want to pretend for Niels that you've been doing things by hand, then this is how to do it.
Yeah, maybe more shaky.
You can make it more shaky or less shaky. So we can go in here and say sketchy lines. There we go. That's something like that. A little bit more, yeah. I think that's enough. That's enough. Okay. So just to show you that's there, but I advise you not to use it unless you're in America, where they like that stuff. The other thing, lighting and photographic exposure. This has to do with renderings and so on. So I'm not going to talk about that so much. But the last thing is background. So in order to quickly make your building presentation quality, you could just put in a sky down here, just like that, bang. And usually, unless somebody is paying you a lot of money to make presentation drawings, that's enough. You don't need to give them any more than that, because that tells you everything about the building and that go. It's usually nicer to do it with a kind of a gradient, something like that, because that means you can control the sky color down here quite easily. So you end up with something like that. Yeah.
Can you upload like pictures of skies? And
yes, you can. Yeah. So you can go in here, edit, background. Instead of gradient, you can just choose image, and then you can just choose a where is it again? Non-selected, customize image. I don't know where that is. Is there an option to load it there? Oh yeah, there it is. Image. Yeah. So you can just go and find an image on your desktop or whatever. You can put anything in behind the image there. Okay. Yeah. So that gives you some really simple graphical ways to present a concept design that doesn't rely on a lot of work. The last thing I want to talk about is more to do with the 3D view. So if we go into the 3D view here of this house, and let's say turn it into consistent. No, let's turn it into realistic. Let's see what that looks like. I'm not sure what it looks like. Whoa. Okay, let's not do realistic. Let's do shaded. And if we go over to the graphic display again, now we have the option to, first of all, we can smooth the lines, just to show you what that looks like. Gives a little bit more quality to it. But its transparency, we have an option to deal with the transparency as well. So we can actually, this is really useful if you're making a frame structure or something, a timber structure inside. You can have the timber structure at full opacity, and then you can have the area around it at transparency, so you can quickly show what's going on between the two things. It's a nice graphical.
How do you choose what? Can you choose to only make the structure one transparency and the rest?
Yeah, you can, but I'm not going to talk about that till next month. Okay, so then you've got the entire house is, oh, it's got nice furniture here. And then you can, if you use that in combination with the section box and so forth, you can really start to make some very descriptive concept stage drawings. And then if we try it again, we can actually go in and switch off the edges. And so, you can kind of make very high quality things, but you can combine 2D drawings with 3D drawings, and depending on what you want to display in your concept stage, you can get a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so that's just simply the graphic display in there, because there's a lot of stuff in here that you wouldn't normally notice, but it gives you the opportunity to make really high quality concept imagery. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I couldn't